Hi, welcome to another demonstration for the Unitrends System Administration course. In this how-to video tutorial, we're going to take a look at creating and managing VMware backup jobs. Plus, we're also going to take a look at application-aware settings for SQL Server. Once again, it starts over here in my lab. I'm going to show you that I've got a local source appliance running UB once again on VMware. It's running on the same host that we're going to back up these VMware guests, as I'm going to show you in this demonstration here. Now, we're just going to start with logging into our local source appliance using your local username and password. Once again, always check for alerts up top, always check for errors anytime you log in. Now, what we're going to show you today in this demonstration is that, we have configured, first of all, in the Protected Assets module, you learned how to register VMware. We learned how to tie that VMware server in to our VMware environment, whether it's at the vCenter level or each individual host. Now, I only have one host. It's my ESXi host on my local domain here. We tied in using that administrator account or our root account, or our administrator account that has root credentials basically to this host. Okay, we're not going to set retention yet. We're going to talk about that in a future module as well. But we've made that connection, and through the inventory sync up here at the top, we're able to synchronize through the API of VMware, whether it's vCenter or individual hosts. We'll go out and reach the host and pull a current inventory from their inventory. Now you can see my inventory here, my domain controller, my exchange, my file server. I've got my local appliance we're running right here. This is my local Satori UI we're running right now. That is the appliance here. I can see my RDR server, SQL SharePoint 1, which we're going to show you application-aware settings on. And I've got my web server. Those are all virtual machines. Now, one of the cool things about the Unitrends interface, I'm going to show you before we go into the VMware environment, because I'm going to show you on the backside of VMware what this looks like off that host as well in a few minutes here. But the cool thing about Unitrends is under the Protect tab, when you drop down your VMware environments, if you have resource groups and resource pool groups, you're going to see those groups broken out depending on which servers are in those groups. So you can see I have a group of no backups. We're not going to run any backups against our web server or our local UEB. Those are in a no backups group. We're not going to schedule any backups against those. I've got an incremental forever VM group. Well, we kind of know what schedule we're going to build around any server in that group. I've got my critical VMs and dependent VMs separated out for me. It's pretty cool. Now, when you look at that through VMware, right, and you log into your vCenter or your VMware environment here, you'll see that same breakdown in my vSphere client. I know I'm using 5.5 here. You may be using vSphere and 6 with the web and all that, and have, the web interface as well too, but you'll see those same pools out there, whether you're using, the vSphere client or the web. And I've got those all grouped in different pools. Now, this is my back-end environment, and I'm not going to run any snapshots back here manually. That'll goof up Unitrends, right? When I start turning on backups and running backups from Unitrends is going to create the backup in the host here. You're going to see it create the snapshot. We copy that snapshot point off, and then if you come in and run your own manual backup, your own full, it's going to screw up the logs from our full and our reference point, right, in the backup group, the chain. So make sure you're not running any manual backups up here or in your vSphere if you're scheduling backups with Unitrends, because it's going to fail the next one, and then the next scheduled backup will promote to a full on its own. So this is what our VMware environment looks like on the backside. We're going to go ahead and go back to our Satori interface here, and we're going to go through the dashboard really quickly and just show you one more time here that if you click on the not protected and you start to filter over here on, even if you look first at the host name, maybe you've got all your stuff on an ESXi host, a certain host name, you can start to filter those assets out, and you can see they're not protected. And if you go down to the bottom in here, you don't see any ESXi scheduled in any of your backups. So you're not doing any virtual snapshots within here as well too. Now, when you think about scheduling your assets, once again, you're going to go back, and think about, all that stuff you learned in the planning module. And you're really going to go back to kind of this slide right here, and you're going to have to evaluate each of your virtual assets, based on these questions. Do you need to recover the entire virtual machine quickly? Do you need any auto-include schedules when you create these backup jobs? Are you going to need any instant recovery from the VM snapshots? Are there any machines that you're going to be able to, need to mount virtual disk to recover any files, folders, or apps in recovery? You're going to go over all these questions with each one of those assets, and you're going to come out with which ones do I need to run virtual snapshots against, VMware snapshots against, right? And then any SQL or Exchange VMs that are running on SQL, single server instance, you can turn on application aware. We are running a single instance of SQL, and I am going to enable application aware for you today and show you what that does, how you turn that on, and how it can affect any agent level backups you might be running. Okay, they can kind of step on each other's toes, as we say. When we kind of think back to this process, and we also think about our Excel sheet, right? We've got our planning Excel sheet that we've been going over and using throughout these labs as well too, and what you would use really at home and during your installs when you do these things for partners and your own end user installs, right? So if we kind of look down at our VMware assets down here, we can see once again that there's no scheduled backups for our web server, but we can run a one-time full against it as long as we exclude the 2 VMDKs. All right, well, we're not going to schedule it. We're not going to cold or hot copy job this machine, anything like that. We're just going to maybe run a one-time full against it, just so we have a snapshot of it. Now, the other machines here, you can see some are pets, some are people as well. Different schedules, different strategies based around their recovery points and their needs. All right, so you can kind of see that as well too. Now, when we kind of make sure we're looking at our includes and excludes, we also have 2 clients here, 2 guests here that we want to make sure we're excluding the underscore VMDK ones. So if you go through your assets and there's certain virtual disks you don't want to grab, you want to make sure you're excluding those from the asset level. They're not schedule based, by the way. They're set at the asset level. We're going to show you that today too. We've got this schedule. We've got 3 groups we're going to create once again. 6-hour recovery points, 12-hour recovery points, and 24-hour recovery points, just once a day. So once again, there's a couple of different ways you can create these backup jobs. You can always go to the job manager and create a job right from scratch and just filter here to your VMware assets. Once again, it gives you this little arrow here you got to kind of break down into your VMware environment. You may have, once again, vCenter, multiple hosts. You're going to break into those hosts and break them down so you can start to see your grouping or your individual guests off each of those hosts. Maybe some of you guys don't even use these pools or these groups. When we kind of look at this process, right, and we think about scheduling, once again, you're going to schedule these servers based around their asset and their recovery point objectives. So they're going to be grouped together. And we're going to start with the simplest group here, which is our incremental forever group. And that's really the most common schedule that you're going to run on most of your machines, by the way. Now, I have a really small environment, so I don't, I'm just going to, show you a little bit of each. But in most of my machines, or most of the machines out there in public, in the industry, you'll probably just run incremental forever against them and let VMware run that synthetic process of recreating that master, that full recovery point for you that Unitrends does on the local system. Now, here for the RDR server, once again, if you look at the details of this, they've specified or we want to make sure we're not including the _1 VMDK. So by only leaving this check mark, we're only going to grab the operating system VMDK, basically. Right? We can recover this machine, boot it up. We're going to have to recreate another VMDK and restore it in some other method. Maybe I'm using this to back up through an agent, or maybe I don't need it at all. Right? So I'm going to go ahead and save that setting. Now, once again, that setting, even though I'm doing it inside of the job, it's actually asset specific. So once I set it here, if I delete this job setting and I come back, that setting's actually already still in there. Now, we're going to go ahead and go to the next screen here. And we're going to make sure that we give this thing a name. And I like to call mine VMW or VMware, right? If you want to spell it all the way out. 6-hour incremental forever, right? Nice, simple schedule. You can put multiple servers into this group once you add more servers that are going to go to this recovery point level. Once again, we're down here at the date. We are running incremental forever. We are down here at the date. Today's date, we're going to start this today, Monday through Friday. We're going to set it to start at 12 midnight. That's the earliest time that we want to start in the AM hours, but we actually want this to run, remember, on the half an hour. So we want to make sure we set it at 12:30, and it's going to recur every 6 hours. So that's going to be 12:30 at night, 6:30 in the morning, 12:30 in the afternoon, 6:30 at night, and then again at 12:30 in the morning, it'll start over. We want this schedule to go all the way to midnight so it goes through all 4 of those recovery points throughout the day for us. All right, once again, you've got your options up here to set your storage. Once again, most physical appliances would have internal storage that you can go to. And internal storage is that big default storage that you keep expanding on your virtual appliances. That's what we recommend for virtual appliances. Once again, you'd make sure you include your job results and your failures in any type of reporting and summaries that you might get. Some cases you might want to turn that off, but in most cases you're going to leave those turned on. We're going to go ahead and save this schedule now. It was created successfully, so here now on our list, we can see that detail. Once again, you can see the assets that might be listed in that schedule. Once again, we've only put one asset in this schedule. And this may be your biggest schedule group at home. This is our recommended schedule for most assets. Not maybe down to 6 hours, but an incremental forever. It might be an incremental forever every 24 hours would be probably the most recommended schedule. Now, kind of refer back to that module when we talk about scheduling your backups. Once again, you're going to refer to any vendors that might have software running on those virtual guests as well, too. Always follow VMware's best practices for snapshotting the type of operating system and maybe applications that are running on those virtual machines as well. We're going to go ahead and this job here would start at 12:30 this afternoon for us, right? But I'm going to go ahead and kick that off early. We'll go ahead and show you what this process is like. We can see it now running here in the status. We can see the last run now, put the timestamp of today, and it still says it's going to run at 12:30 this afternoon. Now, if I go to the Active Jobs tab up here, I can see that job is queued up. I can view the details of it here. Now, it is already making contact with my VMware environment here. Within a few seconds, I'll see it say, creating new snapshot. Finding the UUID, reconfigure the virtual machine, create virtual machine snapshot. It is now going into the RDR server up here and creating a snapshot point in time that Unitrends is going to copy off to the appliance. You can see it creating that snapshot point down here at the bottom. When that is done, that's when the Unitrends appliance will start to say that it's copying data. So here within a few seconds, when it goes to 100%, that'll flip over to say, starting to copy data. They'll give you the status of how much data it's copied and the status of average speeds. Now it says waiting on client data. That's usually a good sign that this is done. Now it's going to go ahead and start to copy the data. The next status will be to start copying the data. One thing you'll notice about VMware snapshots is the progress bar is a little bit more accurate than the agent-based backups when it reports how big the snapshot is and how long the progress is going to take to copy that to the appliance. A little bit more accurate. We'll go ahead and let this job run and watch this for a few minutes so we can see kind of the status of how a job looks when it's running before we continue. There you go. You can see now it's been running for, just even a few minutes. It's already got a gigabyte's worth of data, about 14 megs a second. It's got 7% already. This is one of our smaller VM guests, so it doesn't take very long to snapshot this machine. On the back side here on VMware, you don't see anything happening anymore. Okay, once it's done copying the entire virtual machine, then you'll see it say removing the virtual snapshot. We'll try to catch that at the end once this job is done running here. We'll go ahead and time-lapse this for you and watch the rest of this job. Here we can see this job is running now. It's about 18%. It's got about 3 gigs copied, about 13 megabytes a second average there, going up and down, once again fluctuating. Now, just a quick note while we're watching this job run, you do want to make sure that you have change block tracking enabled on your VMware guest. Make sure through the VMware configuration settings you are enabling change block tracking for these machines to run incremental forever. You do have to have change block tracking turned on to be able to run VMware incrementals. So make sure that's enabled. We'll go back to time-lapse for you. When we look at this process, when it's done here, once again, over here under VMware, we're going to see it say removing the snapshot. It is going to come in here and take this snapshot point that it's copying out right now. This is the recovery point that it's created, and it's copying that job right now. So when it's done, it's going to remove that snapshot, and we'll see that process from within inside the vCenter again as well too. When I see this message over here say waiting on client data again, or some other different method rather than saying transferred, then I want to go back over here and start looking. Here you can see it's starting to reconfigure the machine now, which means the next command that's going to come is going to say remove snapshot. There it is. That means it's done copying the data. It's done copying the data. So now it's going to go ahead once again and remove that snapshot from this machine. And then the next snapshot it runs, it has reference to it in the Unitrends appliance, which can be an incremental. Once again, as long as you have change block tracking turned on for that virtual machine. All right, that's in the VMware configuration for those machines. It's on enabled by default now in 5.5 and above, I do believe. All right, so now that job is done. It's cleared off the active list right away. I can go over here to recent jobs, and I can see that VMware schedule name. I can see over here the asset name. I can see when that job ran and that it was successful. If I need more details, once again, you can view the details inside of here. That's the quickest way to kind of go back and look at what's recently just cleared your queue. Okay, there's also a lot of other ways to look at backups. You can also go to the Protect tab. Let's start at the top here, and you can look across your entire environment, and you can see the RDR server here, or once again, if you know the asset name, you can filter it at the bottom. This is our agent-based asset, RDR server 2. We've been running that for a couple of days. And here I've got my RDR server 1 here. That's the new virtual asset. I have one successful backup, and there's the same detail screen we see from the Recent Jobs tab. Okay, just a different way to look at it, different way to filter on it. You can also maybe remove this filter here, and maybe you want to drop down into your VMware environment. There's a list of all your virtual assets. You can see the only one you have a snapshot for is your RDR server 1. Okay, you can also filter down here at the bottom on only successes in the last 7 days. All right, once again, there's all assets. Now, you also can go to the Recover tab as well. Inside of here now, you'll see a nice clear VMware icon in your list for any VMware assets. That is a backup catalog for that virtual asset with that virtual asset name. You can see I have a new full for that asset. All right, I can do recover files, VM instant recovery of that asset as well too. Once again, check the VMware recovery module and the recovery demo for VMware when you're ready to start recovering stuff. All right, now we're here to look at backups. We've got that RDR server backed up. We've got it scheduled. We can also look at it in the reports. Once again, too, it is now in the backup history report. Once again, you could go back and look at everything, right? Just to give you an example here, this is once again everything, but then you can also start to filter down by the asset name. That's the physical asset there because I don't see any VMware references in here. The asset level for VMware is vCenter. So the first thing you can do here is sort across all your vCenter assets. So if you have multiples, maybe it would be easier if we ran a bunch of backups. As we start to run more, we'll see this a little clearer. But in here now, I can see the RDR server. I can see the elapsed time. I can see the size. A little bit more detail, once again, when you look at the backup history. Right? As we start running more backups, we'll come back in here and take another look at this again. Learn together how to sort this stuff a little bit better too as well, once we get a little bit more backups. But once again, now over here under the database name, if we filter by RDR, there we could see the virtual asset name for RDR Server 1. All right, so a little bit more detail. Now, once again, you always have the dashboard kind of going back up to the top before we run a bunch of backups again now. Now, this hasn't been the next hour probably yet, so it hasn't refreshed the count on us yet, right? Because we should be one more higher here. So if I hit refresh, run this report, if I don't want to wait the next hour, now here under my list of assets, I can sort, first of all, by the true column, and right there at the top pops up my ESXi host with the RDR virtual asset name under the instance name. You can tell right away that that's a VMware asset type. All right, it's on the true section. And then down here at the bottom, once again, under the backup section, we can now see that the RDR Server 1 is a part of a VMware schedule. It's that VMware 6-hour incremental forever schedule once again here too. Now this schedule, once again, just as a summary, before we schedule the next one, we'll start scheduling next ones from here anyways, is this schedule, once again, is going to run here at 12:30 in about 45 minutes. All right, so we're going to go ahead and schedule some more backups. So just kind of give you a little summary of how to read that. We manually kicked it off here. It's already done. It's going to run its next incremental at 12:30 this afternoon. Now, we're going to go ahead and schedule our next group of backups. And, I could go here to backups. Once again, filter on VMware assets, drop into my host, and go to the next group of machines within my set of lists here. All right, you can do it this way. Or, once again, you could go over to the Protect tab. Just go to your VMware environment here and pick off the servers that are in that group as well, too. So if I go back to my spreadsheet over here and I look across my assets, the next group I'm going to do is the VMware monthful with a 24-hour incremental during the weekday. It's for my SQL, SharePoint 1, and my file server. So it's my file server and SQL SharePoint 1. I'm going to put those two in a group together. If you actually break down your dependent group, it's those two machines right there within that group as well. We're going to go ahead and create a backup job for those two assets right from the Protect page. You can see it automatically marked it as a VM asset type and marked those two assets ready for the inventory, ready for the job settings. Now you can go into these, and this is where we add the VMDK exclusions, just like we did for RDR server. We want to make sure we exclude this second VMDK here. We're only going to snapshot the operating system of this SQL server. Our second VMDK is used for NAS apps. We're going to show you how to back that up during the NAS backups module. All right, we'll go ahead and save that. The file server, if I have a look at my sheet over here, it doesn't have any excludes for the VMDKs. It only has one VMDK. We don't want to do any exclusions. It'd be invalid. It wouldn't let us do it anyways. All right, we're going to go ahead and go to the next tab here. Now you'll notice at the top, I want to go ahead and name this thing. I'm going to go ahead and use the short acronym for VMware schedule right there. I like to organize them so somebody coming in behind me knows what this schedule is doing from a basic stance. I also like to tell it what I'm going to kind of run in here from a recovery points perspective. I'm going to tell it I'm going to run a month full with week, day, 24-hour incrementals. Now you can see down here at the bottom, I've got my create schedule highlighted, and then we are going to run fulls with incrementals, so I'm going to make sure I've got that schedule highlighted, that backup mode highlighted. All right, we are going to run here. If I go to my schedule details page, Make sure I'm looking at the right backup types and the right recurrences that I want to plan here. I'm going to run fulls on the first Saturday at 5 a.m. So you'll notice this little drop-down list here right by the full backup section. And you'll drop that down to the first, and you want to make sure we check Saturday. Now, when you think of it here on the calendar, you want to make sure you point this to the first Saturday of the month as well, which would be March 5th. It's actually the first Saturday coming up here on March 5th for me. Plan that out ahead. Look at it. May even be the next month for you. Maybe in the middle of the month right now, you may have to go out to April. Right? You may have to go out to May, June. You may have to plan ahead 2 weeks and set it. We're still going to run a full today because down here at the bottom, we're going to leave this to start today. All right? And even though we're going to run these at 9 o'clock tonight at 9 o'clock, it's going to run our first full. All right? We want to run this Monday through Friday every day at 9 p.m. No recurrence because it's 24 hours during the weekday. All right, we'll go ahead and make sure we set our target options up here. Once again, physical appliances, only one. Virtual appliances, it's that big pool you can expand. Usually you leave that default. Once again, include the job results and the failures in most cases. We've gone ahead and created this job. Now over under our Jobs tab, under our Job Manager, we can now see another VMware schedule in here for the month fulls, 24-hour incremental recovery points, and I can see the assets that are in that group. And now I can kick this schedule off, right? But before I do that, I just want to show you that, once again, under the dashboard, or you can go and run the report for the protection summary. Now, these assets still say false in here because we have not kicked off any backups for these yet. But even without running backups, down here in the backup section, kind of the policies report for what you have scheduled, you can now see that these two assets here, SQL SharePoint 1 and my file server 1, they are scheduled in the same group. You can even sort this by your schedule names and see that a little clearer here, maybe down at the bottom. Okay, pretty cool to be able to see that detail starting to develop as we start to schedule these assets. This is a great report to make sure, once again, as you're starting to change, moving forward, you bring on new assets, you start to schedule new stuff, you do want to make sure you're exporting both of these report types and keeping tabs on them. What do you have scheduled? What don't you have scheduled is just as important. You don't want to waste time trying to bring something back or think about bringing something back that was never backed up in the first place. All right, so now we're kind of ready for to manually start this job. We could wait until 9 o'clock tonight once again. We've got this incremental going to kick off at 12:30, but that's not a big deal. And this is only two assets. It's two smaller assets. We are going to run application aware on this job before we kick it off, though. Okay, I do want to take a minute and set up application aware, because this SQL server is a single instance of SQL running just a few small databases. Right? They're not heavy transactions. They're not heavy growth. I don't need to go in with, I'm not doing any log shipping on them or transactional type of backups during the day. Right? Let's just pretend that. Right? If you've seen the SQL demonstration, just ignore that for now. Now, what you want to do to make sure you've got application aware settings turned on. Right? We set our VMDK exclusions through the schedule, but once again, that setting is kind of global. It's actually set at the asset level through the old legacy interface. It's actually set through the asset level. It's just kind of smoke and mirrors here in Satori or the new user interface. Now, to set a application aware setting on a single instance of SQL or Exchange, it really starts under the configuration tab down here at the bottom. You're actually going to go to your VMware environment and you're going to find that server that you want to enable application aware on. In this case, it's our SQL SharePoint 1 server. By checking that asset here in the list and clicking Edit up here in the main toolbar, right, you can now set credentials and allow or enable application-aware VM processing. All right, now, the credential you use is going to vary depending on your configuration. But in our case here, for my lab, I've set up the local administrator. I'm using a default installation for SQL. It still has all the rights for the local admin using that install. This account works for me. So I'm going to go ahead and use my local administrator account, my same credential I'm using to update the agent if I was rolling an agent out. I'm going to go ahead and enable application-aware VM processing for this virtual guest. All right, that is going to turn on the application-aware credentials are going to be passed through VMware and turn on application-aware backup consistency through the SQL databases. It's going to perform, fulls with type of full backups. It's going to perform incrementals on the databases throughout the day and throughout the week. It's pretty cool. You can recover the databases right out of your virtual snapshots using the itemized recovery. All right, it mounts it off the appliance, and you can copy and paste any database out and recreate any database from those recreated virtual disks. All right, once again, check the VMware recovery module for how to recover from application-aware backups. All right, now in here, we're just talking about setting them up. So we're going to go ahead and save this setting. All right, once you do that, if you break down your list of your clients here again through VMware, you'll then see for SQL SharePoint 1 here, I have the local admin credential is now associated to that machine. Okay, you can see that credential is now assigned to that SQL SharePoint 1 server there. Okay, so now when I run a backup against this server, it's now going to process the SQL databases underneath it for application aware, allowing me to recover those databases outside of recovering the entire virtual machine. Now we can go ahead back over to our jobs over here. We can highlight that VMware monthly full weekly weekday 24-hour incremental schedule, and we can go ahead and run that schedule. All right, you'll now see the last run flip over to the manual time that you kicked it off, but it will still run tonight at 9 o'clock. It'll just run once again the next set of incremental backups. You see the status over here is flipped over to running because we ran the entire schedule. And here under active jobs, I now see both jobs are active. Right here in the next couple of minutes, it'll activate this one as well too. It will do concurrent connections to VMware as well. Okay, here it goes connecting the second one. You will see it creating both snapshots at the same time. It'll go through that process for both of these machines the same as it did for our RDR server. It's doing the file server first, and then it's going to go through the SQL SharePoint 1 server. Now, running 2 concurrent snapshots, 2 concurrent backups, even through VMware, it's going to utilize more resources, more network. These jobs will slow down each of them a little bit concurrently. We won't see them run quite as fast as the RDR server backup did all by itself. All right, so we can see both of those snapshots were then created. We can now see that it's going through the copying data process here. It's actually started to copy data for the file server. That was the first snapshot that it created down at the bottom of that task list. And then it's also probably started to copy data here for the SQL SharePoint 1 server as well too. So we're going to go ahead and time-lapse this process and watch these backups finish up, and we'll show you how to look at those of the catalogs as well too. Maybe show you a few tips in here while we're waiting on these. All right, so here you can see I've got some SQL transaction logs that have started up because it's noon, right? So those backups are going to kick off. We're just going to kind of pay attention to those in our status here and see what happens to those. Now you can see one has already gone off the list, right? We're going to wait for the rest of those to drop off. Then we'll go check our recent jobs and check the status of those once they're done. So we can see that these transaction logs have dropped off of our active jobs queue here, right? Which means we can go over to our recent jobs here, and we can now see that these transaction logs, wow, for some reason, they give an error. I wonder why. But if we go into the logs inside of here, and we scroll down to the details inside of this log, you can actually see an error message in here. In this error message, you can see that it says, unable to perform transaction log backup of database. Accounts receivable main DB, instance SQL SharePoint/SharePoint. It appears that a continuous sequence of transaction log backups is not intact. the next scheduled backup request will automatically be promoted to a full on-demand backup of this database. Review the client log for additional information. Right, which means our application aware from SQL, even though that backup hasn't finished, it already created a snapshot which engaged the application aware settings, and through the snapshot process, it processed those databases already, causing the next round of application agent-based backups to fail in this case. It thinks that something else grabbed the logs. It was VMware application aware set across the SQL server. Right? So our next scheduled backups, right? The next time this job is going to run here, right? Because we're talking about this schedule. This is the one that failed. The next run here at 2 o'clock is going to automatically promote these to a full for me. They fight over the logs, right? Because tonight, if I look at the VMware schedule, tonight at 9 o'clock, it's going to run another incremental with application aware. Now, we really want to break this down for you because this is important. Because once again, if you think back to that, that sheet that tells you can run one or the other within the earlier module for this demo. If I'm running, a VMware snapshot here at 9 o'clock tonight, which is going to be application aware, and I plan on running another differential with my agent at 10 p.m., this differential every night is going to fail, and my first transaction every morning is going to automatically be a full every morning. If I leave this setting on, that's what happens. You can't run both at the same time. You have to choose. Am I going to leave application aware off and just snapshot the virtual machine so I can recover the machine? It would be running the agent, so then I could restore through the agent the databases if I lost the entire virtual machine. Now, in the case of SQL clustering, you put your SQL databases on, remote storage, things like that, different configuration options. You may not be able to run application aware once again. But once again, you cannot run both because every time it will cause these jobs to fail in between running virtual snapshots and the agents. They're going to fight over the logs. Right? So there's a really great example of application aware and, why you can't use both. Right? So you really have to make the determination. And, in most cases, for most configurations, you really can't snapshot application aware in a lot of SQL environments that are, more enterprise level. So, you would still use the agent to protect these assets, and you would go into your VMware environment, and you would then disable by checking that server and editing that server and taking away this credential. Set it to none and take off the enable processing so it doesn't show any credentials in there anymore. Take those credentials away. Now, from now on, I'm not running any more application aware. It's still in that job schedule. All I did was take away the application aware settings from any future backups. Right? It's still doing the same VMDK exclusions as well. We can see these jobs are running in here now. One's 13%. I can view the details of it. Once again, VMware is pretty accurate on the progress here. 13% of 3 gigs. You can kind of estimate how big that machine's going to be. All right, SQL a little bit larger. It's at 2 gigs and at 8%. A little bit larger of a machine too as well. All right, while these things continue to run, I want to talk about the next kind of thing real quick. Next little tip I can give you is that any SQL or Exchange or SharePoint servers that are virtual that you're going to use the agent on, to back up the databases, you're going to use the Unitrends application agents to back up the databases. You're going to schedule against those assets. You may want to think about disabling the VSS writers from within VMware tools. By default, they're on. They technically don't truncate our logs and fight over logs with normal virtual machines, depending on how rapidly your database changes and really what it's doing under there, though. It can affect our agents. So it is recommended to just disable the VSS writers from within VMware tools. Now, the first note is that it doesn't mean that you're disabling the VSS writer itself. You're just disabling it from within the VMware tools when VMware calls for a backup. Right? So when we run schedules like this, when we call for that backup, it always uses VMware Tools. So VMware Tools is going to ignore whatever VSS writer you put into the configuration to ignore, right? And then we talked about it in reference in the module covering this, in the VMware Backups module, and I want to make sure I show it to you. So if you run a Unitrends search here for disable VSS in VMware Tools, here it is. So it's a KB article that's out here, and it talks about how this process works. And first thing you really want to do is remote desktop over to your SQL or Exchange server. Now, this is the knowledge base article right here. There's also a Unitrends one. This is the direct one from VMware that I'm showing you. I'm going to slide that off to the side right there. And once again, in my lab here, in my environment, I'm gonna remote desktop over to my SQL server in this case. Right? So I am going to go ahead and log in to this box. Now, here on this server, to disable the VSS writer, I want to go ahead and go to the command prompt first and find the writer that I want to disable. So you're going to run a VSS admin command, and you're going to say list writers. That's the first thing it tells you to do in that knowledge base article. And we're going to pull this list, and we're going to go through here, and we're going to find any writers that we want to disable. And there's our SQL Server writer right there. So you'd copy that name out, exactly case sensitive and everything. And then the article tells you to go out to your C drive, and it tells you to go to your all users profile. But I found it easier just to start typing C:/program data. And that's the directory that they're talking about right here. All right, it's under the VMware directory, under VMware Tools. Right, you'll create a file called vmbackup.conf. Okay, now just to speed the example up here, I've already created this text file. And in this text file, I've listed the SQL Server writer and the SharePoint Services writer. I'm going to disable both of those from being called from VMware Tools when it runs backups. Right? Now I'm just going to take the one out of here because it wants you to create the file as vmbackup.conf. That's what it tells you to do inside of that knowledge base article. Right? And it also lists the other writers down here. For example, here's the SQL, here's the Exchange, right? And there's also the SharePoint one that I found for you here as well too. Now, once you name that file and you put your list of writers you want to disable in there, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to restart the VMware Tools service down here. Under your services, go ahead and locate the VMware Tools service. You can stop it and restart it, or just go ahead and click Restart. After you've done that configuration change, now any future backups that it calls from VMware is not going to invoke the VSS writers for SQL or SharePoint. My agents are going to be 100% responsible for those backups. I'm also going to make sure I disable any backup routines that dump out any flat file stuff. Those will fight for our agents as well too. You know, you can run database maintenance for shrinking white space and that type of stuff, but don't run any backup maintenance. Those will fight over our logs as well too, just like any application aware settings I showed you for VMware. So go ahead and let these jobs run. We do have one more job to create in this demo as well too, so we'll show you that as well. We're just going to create this one standard here. We're going to go in to create a backup job. We're going to drop right down into our VMware assets. This one is our critical assets group here. It's our domain controller and our Exchange server. Right? It's our domain controller and our Exchange server. Right? We don't have any settings for either of these machines if I look at my planning sheet. Right? I look at my cattle, pets, and people, my tier 1, my tier 2, my tier 3 sheet, right? Each asset listed out, no VMDK exclusions, no settings. All right, so we can go ahead and just go to next here. Up here at the top, I am going to name this once again, a little bit more detailed in what type of backup it's running, and once again, what kind of recovery point am I going to be running across these assets? Am I going to be running a week full with a 12-hour incremental throughout the week? Maybe I want to put weekday even in here. All right? Depends on, the detail level that you want to go. We are going to make sure that we are running fulls and incrementals Monday through Friday on the incrementals down here. We are going to run fulls every week. Once again, I'm going to go to the schedule details to look at that breakdown. I am going to run fulls every Saturday at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we are going to make sure we check Saturday here. We're also going to make sure that we go out to our calendar and check the first Saturday here that applies to that date. Right? Once again, I showed you the first Saturday of the month. Here's every Saturday. All right, we are going to run these once again every Saturday at 2 a.m., so make sure you set that first start time right. It is going to run tonight, though, because we are going to set these for 12-hour incrementals Monday through Friday, and we're going to make sure we set this for our first a.m. start time. Now, it's already past 9 o'clock in the morning, so that's okay. It's not going to run until 9 o'clock tonight because we're going to set this for every 12 hours until 9 o'clock tonight, at least, is past midnight. 12 hours after that, it resets the clock anyways to 9 a.m. Same job options up here for going to our internal. We're going to leave our defaults for the job results and the job failures as well, too. Pretty standard. All right, pretty easy to create these schedules, once again, no matter what type of asset it is. So there's the new schedule created. You can now see inside of our list, especially if you filter or sort these out, I can now see that VMware week full. I can see the assets that are in that schedule as well, too. You can see the schedule breakdown up here at the top if you want a little bit more detail. All right, you can see that this job is never ran yet. It's scheduled to run tonight at 9 o'clock. It would get its first fulls. Now, I've already got 2 VMware jobs running. I'm not going to kick this schedule off until these 2 assets are done. Once again, check with your resources, check with your end users, make sure you can run backups during the day before you kick off a bunch of backups during the day. All right, here we can see another RDR Server 1 virtual snapshot kicked off. We knew that was coming here at 12:30. It's now 12:33, so that kicked off a few minutes ago for us. We can view the details of it here. It's still waiting on client data, which tells me that it is building a snapshot over here. Right, and I can scroll down here where it says create the snapshot for that virtual machine. I can still see it on the task list there. Right, so that process is done. So now in the status here, within a couple of seconds or minutes here, I'll see it flip over to starting to copy data as well too. So now we're running 3 concurrent backups against our VMware host. Now these other 2 jobs will slow down a little bit because they are concurrent connections. Right, but then eventually we'll see this one starting to copy data. There it goes right there. Transfer data. All right, now that that's transferring data, these other 2, once again, will drop in rate just a little bit to even that concurrent connection out. We'll go ahead and watch those in time lapse once again, and once all these jobs are done, we'll go ahead and kick off the next group. Then we'll come back and show you the full recovery area, looking at the backup catalogs. We'll update the dashboard. We'll take a look at our protection summary and kind of show you that process. Now, once again here, usually about 97%, it's probably removing this snapshot over here. We can see it saying removing the snapshot in the tasks once again. So it's going through that process of removing the newest snapshot that's here inside of this manager. It's taking that snapshot away. It does clean up after itself. But it does use some resources on your data storage to create that snapshot and go through that process, by the way. All right, so here eventually this will, now it says waiting on client data. That's the removing of that snapshot. Once it's done, this will drop off that list, and I'll be able to see it over here under the recent jobs. There we go. I can see that backup dropped off the list. So now if I go over to my recent jobs, I can see that new successful snapshot here of the RDR asset, which means that over in my Recover tab For the backup catalog now, for that asset, I have 2 recovery points, an incremental and a full. All right, I can mount those off the appliance for itemized recovery. I can recover the entire virtual machine, or once again, I can do a VM instant recovery from that new recovery point as well, too. Once again, check the VMware recovery module to go through that recovery process and see that in a demo. Once again, we'll go back to our jobs here. Once again, we're going to go to the active jobs and just kind of wait for these 2 jobs to finish up. About halfway done almost with the file server here, and a little bit over a third or almost a third of the way done with the SQL SharePoint server. So it'll be a few more minutes. Once again, here you can see our file server 1 VMware snapshot here has gotten to about that 97% mark, which usually tells me that any second in here, once again, I'll see it say removing that snapshot that it's created, right? So this is the point in time it's backing up right now once again. And any second here now, I'll see it start to pass that command through once it's done transferring all the data from that snapshot point in time. So we'll keep an eye on it now here. It's been running for about an hour and 41 minutes. And once again, any second here, I'll see it show up over on this side. So there it goes. It's going to start to reconfigure the machine, which tells me it's going to go ahead and start to send the next command. And it'll be to remove the snapshot for the file server 1. Once again, that's that snapshot that we just copied off the appliance. So there it is in progress. Now we'll let this, run. You don't have to do anything back here. I'm just kind of showing you what it's doing on the backside of VMware. But that'll run through its process before this flips over to successful. It kind of stays there at 97% until it finishes removing the snapshot. Then it'll go to 100% and once again disappear off this list. Now, there was one other job I wanted to show you guys that we can run. All right, so we're going to go up here to the top. We're going to create a new backup job. And this is going to be against a VMware asset. But if you remember, we talked about running maybe a one-time full against our web server. All right, and we want to make sure that if we do run a backup against it, we follow any inclusions or exclusions in this case. And we want to make sure that we do a disk exclusion. So we want to take those check marks off for _1 and _2 VMDK. We only want to grab a quick snapshot of this virtual machine's, OS, just the basic virtual disk, just in case it crashes. I can put the virtual machines back, recreate these VMDKs, and restore the data to it through the other means. It also, in a good example, it may be a virtual file server, by the way. And you may have a virtual file server that, you want to capture one VMDK of just the OS disk, and yet your other VMDKs are big data, and you want to use the agent to grab them so you can search across them and do, file versioning and searching and all that stuff we talk about in this module when you reviewed it. You have to ask yourself, do you want to exclude or include anything and do different types of backups with the agent as well, right? And a good example of that is a virtual file server. Or a web server, too. Doesn't change very often from the OS perspective. And maybe you're going to use the agent to go after the second VMDK, hosting all the web HTML and databases. Right? And you're going to use an agent to go after all those instead of virtually snapshotting the whole machine. The agent might give you more control and better recovery options. Once again, depends on your recovery point objectives and your recovery needs on how you're going to set these different virtual machines up in here. You don't need to snapshot everything in some cases. The difference here is on this one, we're going to make sure we run this now. We're going to run it on demand. We're going to run a new full against it. Once again, default internal storage, and it's not part of any job schedules or anything like that, but we still want to send any emails if this thing fails. So it will send an on-demand report for us, letting us know it kicked off, and it will send a summary at the end, and if it fails, it'll send a failure. Right? So you will get an email when you start off any on-demand jobs, and you include those reports, by the way. All right, so now we are going to go ahead and kick that job off. Right? You'll see inside of here that this other job has been completed. Right? So I was able to go ahead and start that job off. This other job here for the file server, it's actually off the list as well. So here we can go ahead and see now the web server snapshot's going to go ahead and start up that same process where it's going to create a new snapshot for the web server. It's now snapshotting that one small VMDK. It's going to copy it off. It's just the OS. It's not a very big snapshot at all. We'll see that when it's done here at the end as well, too, in our recent jobs catalog, in our list. Here you can see the VMware 6-hour incremental forever job details right here. You can see it for the asset RDR server 1. That's the one we ran earlier. We also have, that's the incremental that ran. We also have down here, if you look farther down on the list, we have the VMware full 24-hour incremental that ran against our file server is now successful. It's sorted based on the start date here. So we have to go all the way back down to when we ran that schedule to see this successful asset down here. Now, another way to check it once again is under the recovery catalog. We now have a VMware asset here for our file server containing that newest full snapshot. We can see that in our backup catalog. We can also see it in our protect catalog. If I look, or my protect screen here, if I look across my VMware assets, I now have 2 that I have virtual snapshots for. Once again, I can filter out those assets and look across the assets that I am protecting. I can even say, what do I have failures on, in case I have any failures on assets too as well. Now, once again, your dashboard, we have one more new asset now. It's already been updated here. It shows 16 protected assets. If I look at this list at the bottom, I can sort once again on the protected, bring my trues to the top. Here's the new asset right here. It is that file server that just completed its newest full. Down at the bottom here, I have now a new full for that VMware asset. And for the RDR now, I see a full and an incremental. I can see that that's added one more backup here since we last looked at it as well, too. You can see that it's also a part of that schedule, that it's running part of here, the month full, weekday 24-hour incremental. Right. You also want to make sure that you check your reports. Make sure you check your reports. Look at the appliance report for capacity. As you start to complete backups for these new assets, you'll notice that your capacity is going up as well too. Here you can sort it by the size maybe, and you can see your snapshots by size. My largest is still my Hyper-V snapshot, but here I can clearly see a couple of VMware assets. 28 gigs for the file server, and the RDR server was about 17 gigs here. You can clearly see those assets. I can even filter over here. There's a little filter, or maybe I only want to look at the VMware side of it. Now, once again, this capacity report is showing me my newest full only, right? It doesn't care that maybe I have multiple fulls. It's my newest full before deduplication, before compression. What does Unitrends see natively when it backed up this appliance through its snapshot? Of course, it's not using this data on the disk. Once again, it's using inline deduplication, compression, but this is what you would have to put out and restore to a new virtual machine to recreate it. This is native capacity report. As you grow in capacity, you're going to have less retention once again. So we'll go ahead back over here, wait for these jobs to finish up once again under the active queue. We now have 2 more jobs running. All right, I can view the details of these jobs once again. We're waiting on this snapshot to be created in here. That part's done. Looks like it just maybe finished up. So now it'll go ahead and it'll start to copy that data in here. We'll see it saying transferred 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gigs, as it starts to go through that process. We can start to monitor that backup job, the same process. One thing you will notice too, I did forget to point out, let me show you how to run the protection summary report manually. It's right here under the main menu of backups for reports, and it's the protection summary. Now, when you run it this way, you can run it by a date range. Right? We're going to look back, as far as everything we have, just to make sure we're looking at everything. And here you can see that same report that you get when you run it through the dashboard, by the way. Exact same report. Now, one thing I wanted to show you in here, and we'll show you more detail when we get the backup completed, is the web server still says false because that backup is still running. But even though we ran a backup against it, it's not going to show up down here until that backup is completed, and then it'll show one successful backup and that it's not a part of any job. Right? We'll see that detail when we get there. Right? But we do have that job running once again inside of our manager here, our active jobs. We can now see that it is copying data. So we'll leave it there for a few minutes and come back when these jobs are done. And actually, we'll come back when all these jobs are done. We're going to let our schedule tonight now. Let me show you this little trick too. We're going to let our schedule tonight now kick off this schedule down here. We're going to let this one run tonight. And when these servers are done with all the backups and we have fulls for the rest of our virtual assets, we will come back in here and we'll show you how the dashboard is updated. We'll show you the new capacity report, how to really verify that these are good backups, right? So once again, over here, you'll see your VMware assets. We're going to make sure that most of these are true instead of false, and we'll come back, and that looks like they went to the bottom of the list. That's a good example. So here they are back here. So we'll come back. Once again, we will have a true here, but it's not going to be scheduled, and the rest of these are going to be true when we come back. And we'll show you what's updated in the dashboard and all the reports as well once all the jobs are ran for VMware. So we'll see you back in a little bit. All right, so here we are back the next morning, and I'm just going to log back into my local source UI, and we'll kind of take one more last look at all of the VMware backups that ran throughout all of these schedules. All right, so here you can see I'm logged in as me. All right, the first thing you're going to always check is make sure you check your dashboard up here and see if you have any outstanding alerts. Once again, it's usually the first thing you're going to do is make sure you don't have any outstanding alerts. You're also going to check your error messages right away, too. After you come back in the next day, you scheduled some backups yesterday, you really want to start with looking at any errors that you may have had. And once again, we talked about this in an earlier session. By turning on the application aware, at around 11 o'clock when we started our SQL SharePoint 1 virtual server snapshot with application aware, it caused our next round of SQL transaction logs here at noon to fail. It automatically promoted our 2 o'clock round of transaction logs to a full, and it says that in the details of this error message down here. Right? The next scheduled backup will be promoted automatically to a full on demand. Okay, you don't have to do anything. It fixed itself. We took care of that. Now, if you look back at the dashboard here, the other thing you'll notice different from yesterday is that our not protected and protected assets, those have shifted once again based on now the fact that we have virtual snapshots in here for our VMware guests. Right? We ran a manual snapshot here on the web server. We ran a SQL SharePoint RDR. We ran Exchange, the domain controller, and the file server. The only machine we don't have a snapshot on, which makes sense, is the local source appliance itself, our local UEB, our backup appliance. We're never going to back up that appliance if it's virtualized on any platform, Hyper-V, Xen, or VMware. All right, so you can also scroll down now and you can see the rest of our machines are now identified in our backup kind of policies area here, our backup section. We see once again each asset. You can see the number of backups or the backup types that are running against them. Here I've just got a full once again because it was the on-demand. You can also see that it's not a part of any schedule over here as we talked about earlier too. All these other assets, they do have multiple backups. This RDR server right here, it's already got 5 backups. It's got 1 full and 4 incrementals because it's running every 6 hours. Remember, it's part of the 6-hour incremental forever schedule. You'll start to see patterns over here based on how your recovery points are set up. It's pretty cool. Once again, we don't really have any failures here. We do have a warning from a couple days ago. We've already addressed that through our agent. Really in this module, we're focusing on VMware, so everything looks good. No errors, no warnings, no failures. You can also go to the Protect tab. Let's start going down the list here. Once again, you can look at the entire appliance, and you could filter on all successes today. And then you can find your virtual assets in this complete list of all the backups. But maybe you want to drop down into VMware so you just see your virtual assets, and here you can see that I've got complete good backups all day yesterday on every asset that I'm backing up here. All right, if I make sure I go to all back in here, once again, you'll see the complete list. Now it shows once again that I'm not backing up my local source appliance once again, and that's okay. No warnings, no failures, no issues. From this perspective, everything looks good. And once again, you can click on these days and you can see the details. You can see the number of backups that have ran. Once again, here yesterday, 3 successful yesterday, and so far today, I have 2. All right, pretty cool little summary. All right, you can also break down, once again, even go farther into these environments and maybe go directly to that server if you wanted to only see the details for a particular server as well, right? Or all of your VMware environment at the host or vCenter levels in your little mini navigation here. Now we can also go down through the recovery section. This is your backup catalog. Once again, you see all of your assets when you first come in here. It's a full filter on everything that's successful. It only shows the successes by default. We've talked about that a little bit too. All right, now you could come in here and filter out maybe your asset name. Maybe you're looking for the file server, so you can start to type part of that file server name in there, and there's your virtual asset for the file server. Once again, if you clear this, you see all of the assets. You can clearly see the VMware symbol here. Those are my virtual assets. All right, and you can filter on those. They all have 1 at the end of them, right? So if I filter on 1, I now see pretty much my whole virtual environment except for Hyper-V 2 through the WinHyper-V 1 through the agent here. All right, that's pretty cool. That filtering is really cool. All right, I really like the filtering. Now, once again, to do any type of recovery, you'll go to the newest recovery point or the desired recovery point, and you'll use the recovery options up here at the top. All right, once again, check the VMware recovery module for more details on each one of these recovery differences. All right, you can also put legal hold, and you can delete and manually purge backups, but be aware that it will purge the entire chain even though I only have 1 selected. If I delete this incremental, it's going to take the full with it. Okay, just be aware of that. Takes the whole chain with it. If I take this full, it takes that incremental with it as well too. Okay, you can see that whole chain. Just be aware of that. You can see that is going to delete both of those, even if I only highlight the incremental here. It's going to delete that whole chain. Same thing here. Deletes both. Okay, be aware of that. Okay, now keep going down the list. Once again, you have the jobs area. You can see nothing's active in my queue, and I can see those jobs from last night. All right, I could sort it by the name here, maybe look at all my VMware at the bottom. Once again, using keywords in here really helps you organize these. I usually start with a type of backup, and then the little bit of the recurrence. What's it going to do? Once again, these are in groups. So if I have a group of assets that are going to run common recovery points all the way back to that Excel sheet, the planning for the installation and how you plan to back up your assets, you need to identify all these. Don't just do blindly everything 24 hours a day. Now you can see here in the details of these jobs, they all ran, last night or this morning at 6:30 for the RDR, last night at 9, and last night at 9. So these are all running, no problems. No problems. This one also is going to run here at 9 o'clock this morning, right? This 12-hour incremental is going to kick off here, the next one, at 9 o'clock in the morning, which is only 2 minutes away. So within a couple of minutes, we're going to see this backup go online and running here. And these 2 assets will be a part of this backup schedule, right here at 9 o'clock. All right, now you can also go over to your recent tabs here under the jobs. I really like this view because, these jobs go off the queue. Once they hit the queue, they go off right away. And then you go over here to recent jobs once again, and you can see the jobs that are running. You can see right away any errors that you have. Those are those SQL transactions that failed yesterday during our application aware testing and enablement. You can see everything else since then is running great. I've got differential that ran last night against that database or these databases down here, and those all were successful. And at 9 o'clock, I did run another VMware snapshot. So I know at 9 o'clock here, I ran another VMware snapshot against SQL SharePoint right here. And then at 10 o'clock, these differentials were all successful, which tells me my application aware and my VM snapshot is not stepping on any toes with my SQL. I'm able to do both, virtual snapshot to protect the OS and the agent-based backups to grab the databases. Once again, check the VMware recovery on how to put back a SQL server through a snapshot, and check SQL recovery module video tutorial on how to put back SQL databases. All right, you do those in 2 separate steps. Now, you also have recent system jobs. This is like the audit history on the appliance, right? You won't see any backup jobs in here. It's going to say when the backups are marked for deletion, right? Things like that. When people log in and log out, you'll see jobs like that in there. Once again, this job now is kicked off. It is 9 o'clock. You can see those jobs now in the active queue, right? So that's pretty cool to be able to see that next running cycle. And then eventually when you go back here, it's going to say that, hey, this thing's going to run now at 9 p.m., right? It flips over these times for you. Pretty easy to manage these schedules. Once again, you can view the full details of the schedules in here. Great summary for what recurrences you have set up. Once again, this is our VMware group down here. I can see by the VMware schedule names. Right, you also have your reports you can run to verify a few things after you get all your VMware set up. You should have a pretty good idea of your capacity and how this VMware has affected your capacity growth. Here you can see now I'm at 372 gigs because if I look down, I now have a couple of machines that are pushing 50 gigs. Before my CentOS was my largest snapshot on Hyper-V, now I've got a couple of virtual snapshots that are kind of up there in size as well too. My Exchange server's at 54 gigs, and the web server, the one time we ran, even though we're not going to run any more backups against it, we have a one-time full in the system that's now using 49 gigs, or it reports at 49 gigs. Remember, this report, the capacity report, is before deduplication and before compression. These are native numbers, how Unitrends sees the size of that machine. Remember, with inline deduplication, compression, adaptive deduplication, all those things we're doing to help you reduce your data, your footprint, to get more retention, we're still doing that. So it's not using this on the disk. It may be compressed, inline deduped, post-process deduplication, whatever it has to do to help get that space down for you. Okay, to keep more retention. This capacity report, though, on physical and virtual appliances, the larger this capacity grows without expanding your storage or forklifting your appliance, the less retention you're going to have. No matter what type of backup you're bringing online, when it says verify required space, usually 2 times, we're referring to running the capacity report and do you have enough room to add however big this new object is, whatever this new asset is. This is the report that's going to help you do that. This is also a report that helps you kind of have an idea of if, poop hits the fan, how much do I have to put back in total DR? You can kind of estimate your recovery time objective a little bit based on your data size. All right, now we also have in here the backups history report. All right, you can see the backups history report. We do want to make sure we're going back, a good time frame, or make sure we're using the correct date range that we're looking for. Here we're looking at everything down here. And remember, we learned yesterday that you can filter on vCenter, and you can start to see only your virtual backups. You can use these filters at the top. They're really handy. We could also just go over here and type VMware in the application as well, too. Either of those will filter the same. Now you can see the database name. This is my client name, the asset name, the guest name inside of VMware. Maybe we want to filter on or sort on starting date. Here you can see the first backup I ran against RDR and all the way through the cycle through to this morning, and a backup is still running. You can see the domain controller, it's finished up this morning already. The Exchange server, a little bit bigger with incremental changes, as you can see here, about 9 gigs here on changes, right? And the full's 54 gigs. So the incremental on the Exchange one, it might run for half an hour this morning on us, if it's the only job. Here it ran at 9 o'clock with a couple other jobs, right? So it might run a little bit faster this morning for us. All right, but a great report here to really see the elapsed time. This is also how you're going to use the backups report to help stagger your backups. If you have a group of backups that you need to keep away from others, you're going to come in here and see what is the longest running time against that asset that's in that schedule. And I'm going to stagger other backups around the longest running time that I see recorded. Give it a little bit of room to grow, but it's a great way to come in and run this report to help you stagger your backups, your start times for your backups. So there's a pretty good overview of managing VMware backup jobs and the backups themselves.